The existence of natural talent is an undeniable thing, as there are just some people born into this world who can grasp certain topics and perform difficult activities like it was nothing, and because of that, some may come to view those without this talent as lesser in their field. And while the path may be more difficult for those without this said natural-born talent, through many years of suffering and grueling training, it is not impossible for them to match or even surpass those who were. And one man whose whole career exists as a testament to this mindset is the feverish and flexible flamboyant firework festival figurehead fighting ferociously for a fiendless future, Tengen Uzui, the sound Hashira of the demon-slaying corps. Tengen Uzui is one of the major characters during the Red Light District arc of Kimetsu no Yaiba's main story. Being a former shinobi turned demon slayer, it is the skills of his previous profession that helped him not only create a whole new slaying style, but obtain the status of Sound Hashira. Though it was this same training that gifted him his skills, which also caused him to be completely disillusioned with the practices of his clan, ultimately deciding to throw away traditions in the pursuit of his own true self. A passionate desire that forged forth the flamboyant ninja that he is today. Though before we get too deeply into that, let's understand the meaning behind his name and design. Now, the name Tengen Uzui, like most names in Kimetsu no Yaiba, hold within it a special meaning that ties back to the character's personality or history. So let's start first by dissecting his family name of Uzui, which is comprised of the characters for one style or appearance, and the pith or essence of something. So together, Uzui means the appearance is the essence, and is a name that works perfectly with representing the somewhat explosive personality of Tengen, with him greatly valuing his appearance and more specifically his ability to express himself freely, which is of course due in part to his own dark history. As before the events of Kimetsu no Yaiba's main story, Tengen had been born the eldest of 9 children to one of the few remaining shinobi clans of the ancient era. This family would, in an attempt to keep their traditions alive, begin putting their children through a series of extremely harsh training regimens, all with the purpose of making them fierce, loyal, and cold-blooded assassins. Though, of course, due in part to this harshness, Tengen could only watch slowly as a majority of his siblings would die out. Eventually, he was only left with a single brother, who had become nothing more than a soulless copy of his father. And it's because of this history that Tengen chooses to so fiercely embrace the idea of self-expression, with him beginning to dress more flashy and flamboyant as a way of rejecting his father's teachings. And this, of course, is why Tengen, a traditionally trained ninja, would adorn himself in things like gemstones and other flashy equipment. It is all to highlight this element of himself, the one thing that he's proud of, so that he can shine from the depths of his own inner darkness. As well, his abrasive personality and his loud fashion sense, mixed together with him wearing makeup, is all done in a way to seemingly equate Tengen's expression of himself in a similar manner to that of Kabuki theater makeup, as the makeup worn by actors is a major part of Kabuki theater in general, with most performers being required to apply their own makeup as a way for them to not only get to know their own character, but to properly express themselves as said character. The colors used in these performances are also rather important, with the dark red that Kabuki has become somewhat famous for being seen on Tengen as well, and it oftentimes symbolizes both anger and cruelty, as well as passion and determination. Though the styling of Tengen's makeup is definitely different than the traditional Kabuki designs though, as it focuses mostly on his left eye, and the specific pattern in this design matches up with that of traditional illustrations of fireworks from Japanese firework companies for catalogs from the 1800s. Specifically, it matches up very well with the wares of the Hirayama and Yoko Firework Company. And of course, fireworks fit very well into Tengen's design, as it represents what Tengen wishes to embody, something loud, flashy, unique, and of course, powerful. And the method of his slaying style even factors in elements of the firework into its symbolism and effect. And he isn't even the only character to use that type of symbolism throughout his abilities. As well, his flamboyant nature is rather infectious, rubbing off on even his Kasuga Crow, with its name even being Nijimaru, which means circular rainbow, but also we see his trained rodents called the Ninju wearing a similar headband to Tengen. Now, his given name of Tengen is comprised of two characters. Firstly, we have Ten, which can be translated to sky or heaven. And then secondly, we have Gen, which is used as the character for the origin or original of something, which ties back to both his role as the eldest brother of his clan, but also in his own creation of a demon-slaying style, with both of these elements being reinforced when we look at the historical origin for the creation of the word Gen, with an old defunct usage being for the term head or head of, which not only works with Tengen being the head of his own household, but also when we look at his literal head, which is an element of his character design which receives the most focus, both in the multiple flashy accessories he wears around his face, but also his own makeup. As well, we know from the earlier character design drafts of Tengen, there has always been a heavy focus on his own head, with it originally being entirely bandaged, though this element of his design was likely cut due to the overlap it would have with another one of the Hashira, that being Obane Igoro. But Tengen's head is more than just flashy, as it also possesses a unique hearing ability which not only allows him to hear through deep layers of earth, track through echolocation, but also hear the slightest change in someone's movements through the air. He can then use his mind to slowly analyze all the sounds that he hears and then convert them into a specific pattern during their fight, so that he can generate a rhythm that he mentally scores like a piece of sheet music, which in turn he then follows with his pinpoint accuracy, making it so that the longer he fights his opponent, the less breathing room he provides them. And with these two special traits of Tengen, he is able to create a slaying style specifically unique to him. This, of course, being the sound breathing style. Now, the sound breathing style is a Demon Slayer style that, much like its name implies, tries to emulate the elements of sound, copying both that of a loud firework performance right down to the deadly stealth of a ninja, with its practitioner often focusing on mixing together rhythmic performances and explosive power. And oftentimes, this style requires some extra equipment to fully perform its own techniques to its fullest. Though a key ingredient to this style is the conductor's baton known as the dual Nichiren cleavers, a pair of massive Nichiren blades which are shaped very similar to oversized chef cleavers, with both of the handles of the blade connected via chain. The blades of both weapons have a specially designed crescent moon-like hole punched out of them around the middle of each sword. This could be done for a number of different reasons, as it provides a hook-like shape to the blade that allows Tengen to use his weapon similar to that of the ninja's hook chain sai, the Kusarigama. As well, the weapon's opening can be used to both catch and break opponents' weapons, similar in idea to that of a blade-catching dagger from the 1600s, which is likely why the weapon is dual-paired, so that he can catch and control the weapon of the demon he's fighting while slashing at them with the other. As well, this is a good item to have as a demon slayer, because when placed against a powerful demon, sometimes cutting off their limbs is actually less effective than just pinning their arm. Now, given the edges of these cleavers are Nichiren blades, they take on a specific color which represents the user's own spiritual core, with Tengen's being a semi-two-tone gold and amber color. The yellow focus of this ties back to the sound breathing's own origins from thunder breathing, as well as the major colors of the blade work in line with color theory for Tengen's own character, with gold being a color that is both gaudy and extravagant, but also meant to show off oneself, while amber is a color often associated with power, security, and warmth, which are all elements that you can apply to Tengen's own character. Now, the Suba, or handguard of the Nichiren, like all other handguards, holds a symbolic meaning that ties back to the character, with Tengen's being styled in a more common or traditional way, this being the Makogata, or cross-shaped style, and having a crosshair-like design in the middle. What this crosshair design does is use its negative space and the Suba's own traditional design to make it resemble 4 golden hearts resting within his blade, which ties back to Tengen and his 3 wives, as well as his 3 allies during this arc. as due to the Uzui clan's focus on creating as many heirs as possible for their traditions, the clan heads would assign at least 3 wives to any male that had reached the proper age of 15. This is how Tengen would first come to meet his wives Suma, Makio, and Hinasuru, with all 3 of their names and personalities matching up with Tengen's own, as well as reflecting the 3 major protagonists of the series, Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu. So let's start first with a woman who directly chose to be with Tengen instead of being assigned to him, this being Suma, whose name is comprised of the kanji for by all means necessary and to polish or grind, and her relationship with him started off in a very abrasive way, as officially Tengen was set to marry her sister, but Suma decided to crash not only the ceremony, but claim Tengen for herself. She also loves and respects the other 2 wives of the group in a very similar way to Tengen, with Gatoge-sensei even confirming directly that she was bisexual. So a bi-wedding crashing girl whose name means to grind by all means, we need to get Suma in the next Tony Hawk Pro Skater, that's all I'm saying. Though Suma is also designed in a way to represent one of the other members of the cast, this of course being Zenitsu, seen first in how her name means to polish or grind, which can relate to Zenitsu's own personal journey to refine his one technique to utter perfection. As well, her desire to be loved is so strong that she would crash a wedding fits very in line with Zenitsu's own troubles romantically, as well the fact that Zenitsu is the only one of the main cast who has been married before this. The 2 of them are also very competent crybabies, though one thing about her that is very different than Zenitsu is her physical appearance, which actually draws more from Inosuke, with the 2 of them being damn near identical. Which, speaking of Inosuke, next we have Makio, whose name is written entirely in simplified Japanese, which means none of the characters used in it have a specific meaning tied to them, which ties directly to her seeming inspiration from Inosuke, who is a somewhat illiterate wild man who is unable to read kanji himself, with Makio even possessing a similar hot-headed nature and relationship with Suma that resembles both Inosuke and Zenitsu's own friendship. As well, mirroring her co-wife resembling another character physically, Makio's hairstyle possesses blonde streaks and dark roots, which is very similar to the history of Zenitsu's own hairstyle. And then finally we have Hanasuru, which is a name that is comprised of the characters for chick or doll and swan or crane. And as well, it can represent her own position within life of this family. Being the eldest wife of the group, she often acts as an emotional pillar for the whole family, often acting as a mediator between the 2 co-wives. As well, she is able to respect the many different ways people end up living their lives. Thus, it's not hard to see the fact that her appearance and personality seems to take clear reference from Tanjiro. From her accepting nature of Tengen's refusal of traditions, to her own mediating between Sumo and Makio the same way Tanjiro does for Zenitsu and Inosuke, her design even resembles a mixture of Nezuko and Tanjiro if they were aged up, of course. As well, she seems to be one of the most important wives of the 3, at least narratively, and she's not only the one that Tengen directly rescues, and in turn gives her the opportunity to rescue him, but her name is vital to their whole relationship, as the Suru portion of her name is seemingly in reference to the Japanese tale of the Suru Nyombo, or the Crane Wife, which is a story about a man who marries a magical crane which takes on the appearance of a beautiful woman, who, in a way to support her husband, begins plucking her own feathers to sell them, though this process soon begins to make the crane grow deathly ill, and once the man realizes what his wife is doing, he begs her to stop, claiming that love can exist without the need of suffering, though the crane believes that you must be willing to sacrifice for the ones you love or you don't deserve them. Which relates greatly to not only Tengen's own story with his wives, with him demanding that they value their own lives above his and anyone else's, trying to make it so they would never make any unnecessary sacrifices for his sake, which, while being a great symbol of his love for them, it is only due in part to them directly ignoring this command and putting themselves in danger that they are able to swing the fight into the Slayer's favor, as someone not being willing to make a sacrifice for the ones they love does not deserve them. And this is directly symbolized when you realize that the wife who made the action that put herself in danger for her loved ones is the one named after the crane. Together, the four of them have become not only a well-functioning machine, but a family, and that's why I believe that the Suba's four hearts represent them. As well, the second sword Suba, with its own four hearts, represents Tengen and his three disciples, Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu, who are three kids he has a lot of faith in. Now, fighting-wise, the sound breathing style seems to draw inspiration from the usage of Nunchaku, which is a dual-chain weapon that prioritizes quick movement and can be used both offensively and defensively, as while the practicality of the weapon can be called into question, they are an extremely flashy weapon nonetheless, popularized by cinema celebrities like Bruce Lee, whose quick movements dazzled audiences, and made the weapon an icon of martial arts in its own right. Thus, it makes sense to see this type of weapon used by such a flamboyant superstar like Tengen. As well, who doesn't love sword chucks? Cowards. That's who. Also, due to Tengen's own ninjutsu training and his overwhelming physical strength, he can easily wield these two swords in a similar manner to nunchucks, being able to grab onto the blade of the weapon with ease and even being strong enough with his grip strength to control the blades by simply pinching their tips, giving him a much more extended range than he would have with just one sword or two swords on their own. Though Tengen's weapon does possess some sort of strange supernatural-like ability, as due to the weight of the weapon, when they are swung in tandem, they can impact with such force that it gives off the same explosion as a firework, even being loud enough to be heard across town. This is a unique property of the weapon that mixes together with Tengen's own mind and shinobi training to allow him to pull off a series of special forms or katas within the sound breathing style, all which possess names that have specific meanings of their own. So let's go through each of them together, starting first of course with the first kata, Roar or Explosion, in which the user draws both their swords and swings them in sequence with each other so that they can create the massive explosion that his swords are famous for. This generates a sound similar of course to that of thunder or fireworks, which, like with most first katas, the purpose of this is to demonstrate the fundamentals of the technique that will then be used throughout the remaining katas. The harkening back to fireworks also works very well with Tengen's own festival aesthetic. As well, the character used to identify the kata can also be translated literally to thunder, harkening back to the sound breathing style being of thunder breathing origins. Next in the series, we see the fourth kata, Constant Resounding Slashes, or sometimes translated to Death Nails of Avicii, which is a series of mostly defensive rotations that break or block incoming attacks, with the circular rotations of the weapons being mixed together with the explosive beads that Tengen carries with him at all times, making for a series of controlled explosions, similar to that of a firework display, though the other translation relates to its use on demons, as a death knell is the sound of a bell rung for one's passing. As well, the emphasis that it is of Avicii, aka the lowest level of the Buddhist hell realms, works very well in line with Tengen's own role as a demon exterminator, with the sound of his attacks being the last things that the damned souls hear before they enter the pits of hell. Or likely not, as a lot of the demons who claim to have been slain by Tengen in his sound-breathing style recount not even being able to hear him coming at all, which of course plays very well with the death knell portion of the name, as the bell rung to signify death is not for the deceased. And then finally we have the last kata seen in the main series, this being the fifth kata, String Performance, which retools the more defensive fourth kata and converts it into an offensive attack, with the whirling blades and explosive beads used to prevent from any outside attacks reaching the user as they move towards their primary target, each attack being played like a note in a song, or for a modern visual representation, slicing the blocks in Beat Saber, especially since the attack itself is implied to be a symphony of strings, or of course a series of attacks, and this of course visually resembles the finale of a firework display, in which a large series of fireworks are released together to create a rather mesmerizing performance of both sight and sound. Which again, harkening back to the demons who were interviewed in Hell, they also made mention of the fact that Tengen's movements were well detailed and mesmerizing. As well, the video game Hinokami Chronicle added its own additional deviation to this kata, called String Performance Bursting Bloom, where Tengen would follow up a regular string performance attack with an upwards kick into the sky, and while his enemy is airborne, he would chuck a massive handful of explosive beads into the air with them, and then throw his blades up there together similar to a chakram to set off a series of explosives, of course resembling that of a firework festival's finale. Though this time, it takes place within the air. Now, given that this was just an edition of a video game, and I'm not sure if Katoge had any real impact on its design, I don't believe it has any deeper meaning to itself rather than just being the final kata performed in the sky. Though Tengen is more than just a demon slayer. As I mentioned, he is a shinobi and possesses quite a few unique abilities thanks to that. Not only is he adept with weapons outside of his own Nichiren katana, this of course being special kunai, the previously mentioned explosive beads, and of course any ninja tool that you can think of, but he also moves rather silently, with this being an element to why a lot of demons didn't even hear him coming, which of course is impressive given the aforementioned nature of his attacks being rather explosive. As well, he has demonstrated some shinobi skills that were unrelated to combat, like his ability to change his appearance and manner of speaking at will, as ninja were just as much tools for espionage as they were guards and assassins. They would oftentimes blend into the background of environments wearing the uniforms that they needed to at the time, often monk robes, and would be able to play the assigned roles they were given with relative ease. Becoming a completely different person was just an expectation of a ninja. Now, from his abilities as a ninja to his skills with a weapon and him having 3 wives that all love him equally, you might assume that Tengen is a particularly gifted individual, especially since when you look at it, he was assigned his 3 wives and was lucky enough to be born into a family that would give him the skills that would go on to allow him to make his own breathing style and teach him ninjutsu arts. Though the reality of the situation is much different. Tengen wasn't born with any outstanding talents of his own. He had to work to hone his skills, body, and mind to the perfection that it is now. Even when looking at his assigned wives, he valued their lives much more than his and even gave them the freedom to live how they please, telling them not only to put their lives above all others, but himself as well. He was not their master. Thus, their choice to stay with him and be his wife is that of their own affection for him, not some forced creed by his clan. Tengen has seen what true talent looks like, as due to his time in the Demon Slayer Corps, he saw people appear with natural strength, skill, and the ability to lead, and constantly comparing his own achievements to theirs, he felt like nothing, not realizing that this mindset had become like blinders to him, as for most of his life, Tengen suffered from an intense feeling of survivor's guilt, believing, because he did not stop his family's tradition from killing his brothers and sisters, and left his only remaining brother a hollow husk, that he was internally damned. It was his fault, he believed, with him spending some nights fighting with the thoughts of slaughtering his own clan to bring an end to their bloodshed, but he could never commit to the idea. As well, he would oftentimes express his own dissatisfaction with his life to his wives, who at this point all actively chose to be with him, and thus they expressed their frustration with this mindset. Eventually, Tengen would begin to mask his sadness and depression through a manner of self-expression, this being his flashy lifestyle that was created as a mask to keep him focused and determined. And it is this mentality of using art as a manner of coping that is likely why in the high school spin-off story, Kimetsu High, Tengen is an art teacher specifically, as while his sound-based abilities might make him more inclined to be a music teacher, he is a character who is deeply connected with the ideas of art and expression. He even parallels very well off of Gyuutaro as an antagonist, as they are both people who grew up in equally difficult situations for a number of different reasons. Though Tengen, instead of lashing out at the world that caused him such pain, decided instead to take control of his life and build himself up into the better man he is now. This in turn allows Tengen to see the beauty within others, not only noticing how the faults in others can create something of beauty and desirability, but being able to encourage others to live their lives how they want so they don't have to experience the pain that he did. While Gyuutaro focuses only on the ugliness of the world, seeing all others' achievements with contempt and avarice, viewing all good fortune as gifts from the gods that no one rightfully deserves, and thus he actively lashes out at the world that spurned him so. And this parallel in their mindsets are reinforced by the fact that both Tengen and Gyutaro's suffering came at the hand of mankind's own cruelty, instead of that of the cruelty of a demon. And while Tengen's own mindset may prevent him from recognizing it himself, he is just as good as his naturally talented born peers. His strength is as overwhelmingly intense as Gyome's. His swordsmanship is parallel to Muchiro, and he ignites an explosive flurry of courage within his comrades similar to Rengoku. And it is because of this, and the bonds that he made by bettering himself, that he is able to overcome the embodiment of resentment in the form of the 6th Upper Moon Demon. As well, following the Red Light District arc, Tengen eventually is able to retire from the Corps. Working as a trainer, Tengen is able to foster a more positive future not only for the Corps, but his own clan. This being a future that doesn't need to rely on violence or death. Eventually giving life to a lineage of athletes who would eventually go on to claim gold medals at the Olympics. This of course being Tenma Uzui, someone whose name implies that Tengen's life was lived to its fullest, following the defeat of Muzan, with Tenma meaning specifically, the heavens are full, while also seemingly being a reference to Tenma Tengen, the god of learning, and the ascended state of the poet Sugawara no Michizane, thus showing that he inherited his ancestors' association with divine beings. Ultimately, Tengen's character is a story of hard work shining in the face of natural talent, which is an element seen all throughout Kimetsu no Yaiba's own story. As well, his suffering with imposter syndrome and severe depression being masked by a facade of ego and self-expression was something I related to a bit on a personal level. Tengen is one of my favorite characters in all of Demon Slayer. I think his character was able to play with the many different elements surrounding sound, from the sheer silence of his movements to the explosive body-rocking explosions of his blades, right down to his just general design. I could feel Gotoge's expressions of these sounds through the pages of their manga, and I'm glad that we got to see a character like Tengen be able to truly retire in a series like this. And thus, this is why I believed he deserved a proper reforged update to his video, as I wanted it to truly match my appreciation of his character. And hopefully, I've helped you appreciate a little bit better this flamboyant firecracker of a man. And with that all said and done, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want a truly flamboyant future in your life, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimoneta, A Boring World with a Concert of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimoneta.com.